Hi, everyone. Welcome to Beyond Care, where we dive into the heart of caregiving with stories, strategies, and hope for those walking on this journey. I'm Annika Dhariwal, co founder of Land to Care, and today we're exploring a critical part of caregiving building and coordinating a care team that supports both the caregiver and their loved one. Joining me today is Rayna Neises, a certified coach with the International Coach Federation, author of No Regrets, Hope for Your Caregiving Season, as well as the host of a Season of Caring podcast and a dementia care educator. Rayna brings heartfelt wisdom, experience, and practical tools to help caregivers navigate the season with intention and hope, ensuring no one feels forgotten or neglected. Rayna, it's such a joy to have you on Beyond Care. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Annika, for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
So, I would like to begin by asking you, how do you feel that agencies can support caregivers in assessing and differentiating core needs from care needs when building a caregiving team?
So I like to talk about the difference between core needs and care needs because I think we have a tendency to focus only on the care needs. So those are your daily living things that you need help with, from brushing teeth to bathing, all of those things. But the core needs don't disappear. And the core needs are our identity, purpose, those things which make us individuals and make us human. And I think we can be so tied up in what care needs we have that we forget the core needs. So I think one of the most important things as a community of caregivers, those that are coming together with agencies and things, is really paying attention to who it is that you're caring for. So my story is that I've actually lost both of my parents to Alzheimer's disease. So I was 16 when my mom was diagnosed, and she lived for 12 years in the home. And then 7 years after her passing, my dad was diagnosed, and we kept him at home for 14 years. So we had caregivers that came in for both of them and cared for them. And I always like to share just the difference. My mom was an introvert. She was a homebody. She was a homemaker. My dad was very social. And so for my mom, her group of people, her tolerance for a lot of people was very small. So it worked really well to bring in-home care and just have her stay at home. My dad, on the other hand, because he was so social and enjoyed people so much and very physically active, part of what we asked our caregivers to do was take him to the gym. Take him. In fact, he played volleyball up until about 2 years before his passing. So take him to social activities, engage with him in those ways. So I think it's really important to have those conversations. Who are we caring for? What do they value? What makes them them at the core of who they are? And so I think as an agency, really spending the time to listen and understand so that you can really meet both needs.
And also, do you feel it's like comes down to each individual as well? And
100%. I mean, every person is different. And so, with my dad, a lot of senior citizens are doing chair yoga, right? My
right.
dad was bench pressing over 100 pounds, so his idea of exercise looked different. And so I just think you really have to pay attention to the individual person and see, what do they love? What did they love when they were able to make their own choices, especially when you're dealing with brain change like that? But what are the things that really help them to feel like themselves? And how do you be able to continue those things? Maybe modified, but continue to offer those opportunities.
Okay. And then what strategies do you recommend for building a reliable yet effective care team that can adapt as caregiving needs evolve over time?
I think the family members play such an important role in that because they have to be willing to move and change with the person that they're caring for. Again, with my experience in the dementia world, I think the families have the hardest time letting go of old expectations and old relationships, whether it be a spouse or even a child. That expectation of mom and dad always did this or was always able to do that can be really hard to let go of. When you bring your agencies in and you have professional caregivers that are assisting you, they often can go with the flow a little bit easier because they just don't have that background. They don't have that connection to the old person. So I think it's so important for us to be willing to be flexible. But again, communication is the key. As we see progression, communication has to happen. As we kept my dad in his home, we brought all of our team to him. So he was the only one that was there all the time. So that communication was so important. If we saw some change in his ability to, bathe or to be able to brush his teeth, we know progression is going to happen, but sudden progression is not normal. And so having that communication with the family to say, hey, we had a really off day today, and documenting that and being able to say, okay, we're still struggling, and be able to go to medical professionals and check and make sure there isn't anything else going on. I think so many times that communication and documentation makes such a big key to making this successful.
I really resonate with communicating with family members because as I've seen my grandparents get older, specifically over the last 2 or 3 years, I've realized like we know their needs best because we've just seen kind of our family members before they were in the need of care, and hence you can like catch on to changes so much quicker than someone who's coming from outside to give care.
Definitely. We know the person who's with the person we're caring for the most, we know them best, right? And so being able to communicate that in a way that helps everybody get on the same page can make a big difference. So we both can see changes as well as, the outside eyes might see danger or unsafe things a little easier than we do because we see it all the time. So we both have a great value to bring to it, but that communication has to be there.
And how do you suggest for caregivers to balance emotional, physical, and logistical responsibilities when assembling their care teams?
You have to be open to help. And we say that all the time to family caregivers, especially. But we had, like I said, 10 to 12 different people on our team. I have one sister, so it was the two of us, and then bringing in different supports. So being able to say, I don't believe that being with someone 24/7, the only person caring for them, is healthy. In a long-term situation, there's just no way to meet your own personal needs when you're caring for someone else to that level. And so being willing to bring in help, build the trust and communicate so that you can go and take care of your physical needs. The number of caregivers who don't take their own doctor's appointments, don't go to the dentist, don't continue to care for themselves is blows my mind. And I was lucky enough to be able to drive. I actually was 220 miles from my dad. So I would go up and stay for 3 days and then come back to my own home, which allowed me to have routine and rhythm to continue to care for my own needs. But we have to make sure that we think about all of those needs. So not just the person that we're caring for, though it's very important to take care of their physical needs, spiritual needs, emotional needs, but we also can't just place them above us. We need to be equal in need and in being able to have those needs met. And the only way we can do that is by building a team, not trying to do it all ourselves.
That's such a good tip because I feel as just as human beings, we like have the tendency to once someone is in your care to just really neglect yourself, and then you get so involved that you just completely forget, which is the most important thing because until you're in a good space, then it's a lot easier to take care of someone else.
Definitely. And I always want to encourage caregivers. Your goal is to walk your loved one all the way home and still have a life that you love. If you have given up everything that you love and who you are as a person to be their caregiver, I guarantee you that doesn't make them happy. I know that my dad was thankful that we were able to care for him the way that we were, but he also was very proud of me for having a successful marriage and running a business and doing other things beyond just caring for him. So we don't want to give up our whole life as caregivers. We want to be able to shift and focus on what's important, which is the person we're caring for. It definitely a higher need time in your life, but it won't always be that way. And if you don't set yourself up to stay healthy, then you won't have a life that you love to walk back into.
And what are some common challenges that caregivers face when coordinating a team, and how can they overcome these obstacles?
I think it can be so challenging to find people that you trust. This is a person that is so important to you, and depending on their ability to communicate their needs, it can be really hard to trust your loved one and leave and allow others to step into that role. So I think finding those people, again, communication is the key to being able to build that trust, but also understanding yourself and knowing what it is that might be holding you back. You can learn from yourself and be intentional and say, okay, I'm just going to try an hour. What can happen in an hour, right? And allow yourself to build up if you're struggling with that. But I think that you have to find that way to be able to find the trust with the caregivers. And that goes both ways. As an agency, I probably wasn't the easiest client, and to say, we ask for a team. We ask for specific number of people to come to our home, to meet our dad, to go through training. We talked about his routines, his likes, how he wanted things done. And we had expectation that only those group of people would be sent. So if someone was out sick, they needed to match, someone from the team, or we didn't want a stranger to come in. I always say, especially with dementia, actually, I don't know. I don't think I would take too well to any stranger coming in, waking me up and telling me to take my clothes off and get in the shower.
Right.
It just isn't natural, right? So
Mm.
to expect that of people that we're caring for is a pretty big jump, especially if they don't have a good memory. So I think it's a matter of really just developing those relationships, building that trust, and I think building consistency in the caregivers is one of the most important keys to making that relationship work and relieving the stress of having to trust your loved one and to make sure that your schedule is met, because having people get sick. And so we know that they're not always going to be there just because they're scheduled, but we want to make sure that we have that consistency as well.
So being consistent yet adaptable.
Yes, definitely.
And then moving for my last question, I'm going to move on to a topic I think that's very heavily discussed in the past few years, which is AI. So,
Mhm.
how do you envision AI tools supporting caregivers in managing both core and care needs, as well as in coordinating their care teams more efficiently?
So AI has so many possibilities. And when I look back, my caregiving season ended. My dad actually passed away. It'll be 7 years in just a few weeks ago. And so we didn't have a lot of technology to help us, but I just am so excited about the things that are coming. I think when we're looking at core and care needs, I think when we really use AI to help us problem solve, to teach AI about our loved one and then ask, what would they like to do? What are some ideas that you think would be a good thing to do with my dad who's 85 and loves this and that, So I think it can help us be more creative and be able to actually take care of those core needs in a completely different way, because so many times I think in caregiving, again, we have those relationships that we're kind of stuck on. And so we don't always see the forest for the trees. And so I think AI can really help us with that. And then those care needs, those reminders, the AI can help prompt, it's medication time, it's time to start getting ready for bed, it's time to keep those routines. Sometimes when we're caregiving and the person we're caring for is a little resistant to instruction, I think we can find AI to be really helpful, because alarms can go off and be like, oh, this now it's time to transition to the next thing. Now it's time to go ahead and look at dinner or whatever it is you need them to do. And I think that can be a really helpful tool as well. So as things continue to develop with AI, I think there's going to be amazing potential to address both those core and care needs. And then the other piece of that you mentioned was just that team building. And I think that communication is one of the biggest challenges, but if we can learn to communicate with AI and allow them to the AI to tell us, the schedule, the routine, the opportunities. One of the things that we did on paper and pencil was, what did dad have for lunch? What did dad have for breakfast? Because we didn't want him to have the same thing every day, right? So writing that down and then recording how much of it did he eat? Because some days he would eat it all. Some days he wasn't feeling well and he wouldn't eat very much. But being able to have AI, a tool to assist in those kind of documentations, I can just imagine it waking you up the next day and saying, today, why don't we try this for breakfast? And, asking, prompting the question, how did breakfast go? How much did he eat? Did you remember to give him medication? I just think it can be amazing the things that it can help us to really bring together and document well.
That's very interesting. And I feel like probably in people's caregiving journeys, once they get familiar with AI and as they like try out different prompts, then they'll realize how much more effective it can be like each time you kind of use it and get familiar with the different tools.
hmm And I'm sure the tools are going to continue to develop.
Yeah.
And I can imagine it will blow your mind. I know I've seen some advertisements for some socialization with AI, which
Wow.
is amazing. There's a telephone type system where an older person can actually pick up a phone, have a conversation with an AI who gets to know them, and the phone can ring and prompt them if they're living on their own still and they're isolated. I think there's some amazing things that we can do with that to just try to help, again, bring that team together and be one more piece of it. It's not the solution because AI is never going to have a heart
Yeah.
like we have for our loved ones. So we are always going to be that really important key. But again, it's going to be one of those pieces that if we can learn to use it to our benefit, I think it can be really powerful.
And that concludes our conversation for today. Rayna, thank you so much for your ex sharing your experience and tips with us today. Your practical strategies and compassionate approach give caregivers so much to work with as they build and manage their care teams. To everyone listening, if this episode gave you new ideas for supporting your caregiving journey, share it with someone who might need it or use it for yourself. Please follow Beyond Care for more conversations that uplift and empower caregivers. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you for listening.